Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Conversational Witchcraft. Before we get going, this is your blurb about subscribing to the channel, liking everything, hitting all the buttons. If you love what we're doing, you can now support this podcast by clicking on the support us link so that I can keep bringing you great information and more inspiration and awesome conversations. And to our current sponsors, thank you so much. We appreciate you. You have no idea how much you are helping us build the community and have more great conversations. Don't forget, you can visit me, Dawn the Kitchen Witch, directly and learn more about food and magic and kitchen witchcraft at cucinaaurora.com. Okay. Without any further ado, we have the amazing, incredible, spectacular, gonna make her blush, Danielle Dionne, the psychic medium, witch, herbalist, homesteader, and author of the books Magical Mediumship and Chronically Magickal, which we're going to talk about today. She is a high priestess in the Temple of Witchcraft Tradition, serving as Ministerial Deputy of Scorpio Ministry, serving the community regarding death, dying, sacred sexuality, and ancestral connections. Danielle runs Seed and Sickle, an online space where she offers psychic and mediumship sessions, herbalism, consultations, mentorship, consultation on death, care, support, and living a magical life with chronic illness. She lives in southern New Hampshire, right up the road from me, at Crossroads Farms, a spirited homestead raising heritage breed livestock. She enjoys connecting with those like herself who are magical practitioners living with chronic illness. Danielle, I love you so much.
Love you too.
I'm so excited because literally of every single person I've had on the show, you are the person that lives the closest to me. Legit, like
Yes, I know.
2 miles up the road. And we can never make this work.
I know.
Right? Like
It's been a process.
it's been a total process. I think we take for granted. Like I think I take for granted that you live up the road from me. Like I drive past your house at least once a week. And I'm always like, where are the happy cows? Oh, look, there are the happy cows. Oh, look, there are the happy sheep. Like literally, your farm brings so much joy you don't even realize.
Oh, that makes me happy. So I'm glad to share it with you.
Seriously. And I'm just so happy to see your face and you here. And oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. How did you get into, just because nobody knows you, I know you, but like people that might not know you, you do mediumship, you raise animals, you have a farm. Now we're going to talk about your new book, but we'll save that to the end. Like, let's just get to know each other first. Like, how did you even get into farming?
Yeah, to get into farming. Ooh, well, I grew up working on horse farms. So I lived in Manchester, which is a city in New Hampshire. And but I've always loved animals since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And as soon as I was able to ride, I took riding lessons and then just worked my way through shoveling stalls in order to go to camp, do lessons. I taught lessons for a long time, and it just became a big passion of mine. So I knew when I got a house, when that was going to happen, I wanted a farmhouse, and I wanted an attached barn because I wanted to be able to just like run over to the animals whenever I wanted. And so we bought the farm when I was 22, which is nuts. It was like in 2009, the beginning of 2009, right when the economy was tanking, and and like we did, and then it was like immediately underwater. But we immediately got goats, and we had a couple horses, and that's how we started the farm. And it's really progressed from there. We've had all kinds of different animals. Right now we have sheep and cows and little miniature Nubian goats who I love, and some pigs and chickens and an elderly turkey named Ted.
Yeah, who greets you when you drive up the driveway.
Yes.
The turkey comes and is like, "Hey, man, what are you doing on my property?" And then you go over to say hello, and he's like, "No," and he runs away. Like just
Yes.
the cutest, most wonderful. Like I grew up in New York. We don't have animals. Like I mean, that's not entirely true. I grew up on Long Island where we have like squirrels and pigeons and blue jays, and the occasional rat. But that's kind of it. Like you don't see turkeys or chickens, and only people that are super duper fucking rich have horses.
Oh yeah.
Right,
Yeah, we don't have horses anymore.
right. Like, but there you have to have
Yeah.
so much property. Like, I think the laws like you have to have an acre or 2 acres of property to keep horses on the property, and no one can afford that kind of money unless they're Billy Joel.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like there's no space for animals. And meanwhile, like here, you're driving around like, oh my God, everybody's horses and chickens and goats. And it's just the best. So you said you grew up riding horses and going to the horse farm and stuff. Was that kind of like connecting to nature? Was that your first connection to spirit and witchcraft?
Yes and no. So I definitely was a little nature kid. Like I always liked being out in the woods. My grandmother would take us for walks in the woods and, point out plants for us. And so I was always very interested in learning about plants. And I got more into the witchcraft, magical mediumship side of things when I was 6. I had a best friend who passed away unexpectedly, and I started to have experiences where I would like see him, which is not necessarily how I experience spirit today. It's very different, and I'm like I always go back and I'm like, wow, that really happened. I have little kid journals where I write about it in my little journal. Um,
Wow.
and basically had these experiences where I felt like I was communing with him, in the sky and just receiving these messages that were really comforting. I was not freaked out by it.
You were just
We
like, my
also
friend is
lived,
different now. He's just different. Like,
yeah, it was just different.
wow.
So I just got really into like reading books about, mediumship and spiritualism and witchcraft and Silver Ravenwolf was a big influence, and Ted Andrews' Animal Speak book was like my favorite book in the entire world.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
so that's kind of how I got into it. And since then, I've just kind of hit the ground running. But yeah, I was a little kid who was having seances on the playground. And when people asked me in second grade what I wanted to do, I would tell them I'm going to be a parapsychologist and I'm going to go to Arthur Findlay College in Stansted, England when I grow up. And when it was 2011, I got to go to Stansted, and go to Arthur Findlay College and study advanced mediumship there, which was like a dream come true for me. And yeah, I still connect with a bunch of Arthur Findlay teachers. I used to have a Moth and Moon studio where we would bring different teachers from all over, and some of them taught there. So it's cool how it all kind of fit full cycle into my life and how I'm still doing what I love.
Right. And that's crazy. It's crazy that you're like this little kid and you're having these experiences with this other child that passed away, which by the way is traumatic in itself, right? You're a little kid.
Yeah,
Children don't often experience death like that, and certainly not of their peer, right?
right.
Like, can you tell us what, I mean, do you remember what that whole thing was like? And do you think that that sort of opening up of your consciousness in the mediumship side of things, that was triggered by that trauma of losing your friend? Or do you think it had anything to do with that?
I don't think everybody needs to have like a traumatic death experience to do mediumship for sure.
Sure, sure.
But for me, it kind of launched me into really being fascinated with death. I also had my sister had a little another close friend from our church. We went to a church when I was a little kid, who passed away of a brain tumor around the same time, and she was
Wow.
5 years old. And in that same kind of year span of things, we lost our great grandmother, our grandma May, and she was like 93, and we watched her have a hospice death and a beautiful death in some ways. So I was getting a lot of exposure to death in different ways. So like terminal illness with a little kid, a good death with an elderly, person, and then sudden loss with my friend Ben. And yeah, so I think I just got really fascinated by it. I think we don't give kids credit for how much they do understand. Like I remember being like, okay, well, my parents sat me down and told me that my friend died. I remember being like, okay, I understand like the finiteness of this.
Yeah.
Um, but like the mediumship stuff, when it happened, it just felt so natural. It just was kind of like, oh, this is cool, this is happening. And I don't know, it just became not scary. I think there were some parts when I would go when I remember visiting my grandma May that that were a little like, oh gosh, like I'm coming into the room and she doesn't have her wig on and I'm used to seeing her in a wig and
Yeah.
but I appreciate that now that I had that opportunity to go in and visit and sort of sit in the room with death approaching, which is something that I have done a lot more of
Yeah.
since then. I've volunteered with hospice for a long time. I used to work in assisted living homes. I worked in a hospital setting for 10 years. So being in the room with death is something that I think is such an honor and privilege to be part of when you get to have those experiences. And I know even just at a young age, just that little, just that experience with my grandma may shaped a lot of my feelings towards death.
Well, yeah, and like you said, like I don't think we could give children enough credit for that because I think we are as adults, we are afraid of death. We are afraid of our own mortality. There's societally just such a cloud around aging and dying and in most cases, most of us are going to live long and die well. And death, like birth, is one of the things that all human beings will experience. I was just
Right.
having this conversation with someone else and talking about how, like, we will all experience death, our own, of course, but between now and then, loss of others and helping friends go through loss of that. It is so intrinsic to being a human being and a spiritual being, but yet societally we cloud it with fear and anxiety and all these negative emotions, and so we put that on kids as well. And you were here as a young person experiencing it with, it sounds like no one said this is scary or we should be afraid or we shouldn't talk about this. It sounds like that was very open communication for you.
I think in some ways, I think I got a little obsessed with death and then it was kind of like, stop talking about that. Um, so we're at the dinner table. And so there was a little bit of, uncomfortableness around that with my family. Um, but yeah, I do think it's something that we need to talk more about. And it is such a taboo topic still.
Yeah.
It's funny, I'm adopting kids, as you know, and I just had this conversation today. My 15-year-old went to therapy and she was talking about it's the death anniversary of her bird passing coming up. And she was saying how, I used to be afraid of death until I came to live with you. And I was like, oh, like that's so,
Yeah.
is that sweet? I don't know if that's sweet. We have a lot of older pets. And so since she's come here, our 17-year-old cat passed away. And so we got to be part of that hospice journey with him.
Yeah.
So she's gotten more experiences with death herself. And it was really cool to hear that. I was like, yes, that's what I want to foster. And I think with the Temple of Witchcraft, Scorpio Ministry does a really fabulous job of trying to hold spaces for having conversations about death. We used to do death cafes, which are, you can check out deathcafe.org if you're interested in them because they hold them everywhere. We used to hold them, which are just kind of free, open conversations about death. So
Yeah.
anything that kind of comes up, it's not a bereavement group, it's not counseling, but just topics about death. And we've moved more towards mortal musings where we do some presentations where we'll talk a little bit more professionally about some of the aspects of working with death or doing spiritual work with death, mediumship. But it's a place where people can come and talk about it because I don't think we have a lot of space in society for that, and it's becoming more popular, which I think is good.
Yeah.
We need it, but chip away little bit by little bit, and
Yeah.
that's
And
one way to
people
do it.
now, even understanding the concept of a death doula, someone who is there to help you through or help the family through or help the individual through the process of dying. And I also think like the more you talk about it, the less scary it becomes. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want to die, but
Yes.
I feel like the more we talk about it, the less scary this inevitable truth is for all of us. And as witches, as pagans, as energy workers, we understand the cycles of things, right? Everything starts and everything ends. Everything starts again, right? We see it, in the wheel of the year, in the cycles of the earth. We see it in the cycles of our own lives, in the zodiacs, in our charts. Things begin and end and begin and end again. So why are we? What, in your professional medium opinion, Why do you think we are so afraid of death?
Yeah, I think we're taught that way. I think we've grown apart from having death be so close to us. I think,
Yeah.
at least in, American society, and in a lot of parts of the world, we have, the funeral home movement after the Civil War where we had tons of death. Now we have funeral homes taking the bodies away, we're embalming bodies, not that there's anything wrong with that. There are other alternatives to it too. But it used to be the caretakers in the home that would take care of the dead. And so I think since we've moved further away from that, it becomes something that's unseen, that's hidden away, that we don't talk about, that's messy, kind of like birth, same thing,
See,
in a
yeah,
lot of ways.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think that's maybe, one of the reasons that it is such a, continues to be so scary.
Do you feel like because of your psychic mediumship ability that it's less scary for you because you're having conversations with people that are on the other side and you're like, "Oh, they're good." So for you as an individual, as a practicing witch, as a practicing medium, do you feel like because for you individually, it's sort of demystified that you are more accepting of that?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that was one of the great gifts of having lost my friends early on, is that I really did feel like there was a connection with them still. And so I did have this, early on feeling that life continues on, in some form, or not, necessarily life. I was a spiritualist, and have a background in spiritualism. So they kind of frame it more as that the continuation of life after death.
Yeah.
And that's one way to look at it. But I do think we continue on. We are able to connect with, aspects of the self, and that can look different to different people. But yeah, it was comforting to me. And so I think that, it's one of the reasons I'm not so afraid of it. And I don't really fear death. I fear the loss of people around me. I think it's worse for those that have to go through the grief process.
Mm.
So when I think about death, I don't, if I died tomorrow, I'd say, you know what, I had a really good run. I'm happy for where I was, what I got to do. I lived a pretty awesome existence. But if, a loved one of mine, were to die tomorrow, that's what I'm afraid of most.
Seriously,
It sucks.
seriously. So like I said, like I don't want to die. I'm not into that, I don't have a death wish or anything. And of
Mhm.
course, you worry about as someone that has chronic illness, you think about your health and you think about, the domino effect of your chronic illness, which again we'll circle back to later. But I was recently having a conversation with a really good friend, and we were kind of talking about fear and sort of doing uh, exposure therapy, like sit and think about the things that you're really afraid of, right? So that you don't have anxiety about those things. You kind of visualize, okay, well, if the worst thing in your life happened, then what? Then what? Then what? And he was saying that, the things that he was the most afraid of were getting sick and then dying and pain and da da da. And all the things he was afraid of were about dying. And as he was talking, I'm thinking about all the things that I'm afraid of. And none of them are about me dying. They're about loss, losing others, losing this, losing that. And I was like, oh, exactly what you're saying. How the grief, because I've experienced loss. And how does that feel? And then watching other people experience loss, like that's more scary to me than my own death.
Yes, same. I completely
Right.
agree. Yes.
Crazy town. And to be fair, let's get back to you as a medium because your first book was Magical Mediumship. And I'm going to say personally, for anybody out there listening, I have had a personal mediumship with Danielle has done a personal reading for me. And it was literally the best reading I've ever had and the most healing reading I've ever had because you were able to connect with my father in a way that I've had him come through in other readings before, but you were able to connect with him in a way that really, really felt like he was sitting right next to me. And I've got messages before through other psychics, through other mediums, through my own working, but with you, energetically, I felt like he filled up the space. Can you talk a little bit about, as you said before, you went to school for advanced mediumship and you've been working in that field for a really long time. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that process was for you?
Yeah. And thank you. Like, oh my gosh.
Like, why are you so good at this shit, man? Like, I mean, really, really amazing. And I keep recommending you to people. And every
Oh, well, thank you.
person that has had a reading with you, you just did an animal reading for another friend of mine. Like, literally, what you went to her house and you were like, yeah, your cat feels like this. And she's like, you're so fucking amazing. I can't. So, like, how do you get from I'm this kid who's talking to my dead friend and talking about, going to paranormal psychology classes as a child on the playground to being this amazing psychic medium, writing books and teaching and having this life that you have? How do you get there?
Yeah. Well, I've always loved animals, as you know. And so when I turned 16, I got a job working at Petco.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I met an animal communicator who, I think she came in as a fundraiser and people were like, oh, that she's nutty or whatever. And I was like, nope, I'm totally into this. Like, and quick weird story. So I talked to her and I was very into ferrets at the time, and somebody had dropped off a ferret that was basically being abandoned at
Oh,
Petco. And so we would find homes for them. And, we worked with shelters and things. And
yeah.
I often took animals home. And so I was taking this ferret home. And I was like, what can you tell me about the ferret? And she went on to describe some of the health problems that he was going through and that he had a little red ball in his cage, which he did. And like, just, it was really cool for me. I was like, okay, like there's something to this. Which I mean, I believed anyway, but it's always nice to have that evidence. And I think in my mediumship, I try to be about evidence as much as the essence piece. Um, but I ended up connecting with her and she taught Reiki. And so at 17, I learned Reiki and it became such an amazing
Yeah.
thing for me. Like I was giving Reiki to everybody that I knew, and doing it for myself. And actually, I wasn't doing it so much for myself. It was later that when I became a Reiki master, a few years later, when I was in college, or right out of college, that I was like, oh, you can do this on yourself. I really didn't get that part for years. It was kind of other people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, coming back to my new book, when we talk about it, it's like, no, do things for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And were you
but
doing it for your animals? Were you doing Reiki on your animals?
Yes. Yes. And
Amazing.
actually, the first thing that I ever Reiki'd was an iguana, because I was a Petco, and he died in my arms. And I was like, oh my God, I broke him. Like, what is this? And then I went to her and I talked to her about it. And she's like, no, I think you have this gift where you're going to be present with, animals and people when they are crossing over. And she was completely right. Like at that point, I hadn't had any experiences besides the early on experiences with
Yeah.
death. And then I, would go on to, in college, I worked at an assisted living home, as a personal care attendant. And so I got to see people in hospice all the time. I got to sit with the dying. It was really just an amazing experience. So she was right about a lot of things that she sort of predicted and shared with me. And so she was really influential on my sort of next steps. And then when I became a Reiki master, I studied for a year with this woman and she started to get into mediumship. And I didn't realize that there were spiritualist churches in the area. So like my whole life I've been interested in spiritualism. I thought that was like a thing in England, like we didn't have it here. Um, Even though like, spiritualism was sort of born here and became big and then it, went over to England and became also really big. But that's kind of the hub. Although there's so much of it now in the United States. That has shifted over the last 18 years. But when I started, so I started to attend development groups. And so I met some really amazing people. I would go weekly, multiple times a week to sit in circles and connect with spirit and get
Yeah.
evidence, get validation for, what was being brought through. And I just sort of became addicted to it. So, I started forming my own circles. I had private circles. I would meet people at the grocery store and I would like, I remember I was talking to this one woman in line. She somehow something psychic-y got brought up. I was like, oh, I'm studying to be a medium. Why don't you come to my house? And I held like a little, private gallery with a bunch of weird random people that I had met, invited them to my house and like would read for them. And so basically any exposure that I could get to it in the beginning, I took advantage of, which was really fun and also a little crazy to look back on.
Great. You're
Some of the
like, I
things
just picked this person up in the grocery store and they came to my house and it's fine.
yeah.
Everything, yeah, it's
Well,
fine.
I did paranormal investigations too. And so I would like, they would take me and they wouldn't tell me where I was going. And I'd be like, Austin, I'm going somewhere. I don't know where it is with these sort of strangers. Like, I'll be back at 2 a.m. Like,
Oh
so
my God.
yes,
Wow. Wow.
early
Okay.
20s
So
Danielle
like
was special.
like sidebar paranormal investigations, right?
Mhm.
So there's like these crazy fan groups that are like obsessed with paranormal stuff, and and my feeling, and I would never claim to be a psychic. I think all human beings have psychic abilities. I think sometimes they pop up. I think some of us are more inclined for this or that. Like I can look at a couple and be like, oh, they're gonna make it, or no. Like I get that. You know what I mean? Like I could tell when people are meant to kind of go together, but I would never say I'm a psychic, right?
Oh, you
Wait,
should.
no, but I'm not. But I'm not. I'm sure that I could hone whatever my natural ability is, because I think we all have that, because we all vibrate at certain frequencies. And so we can kind of feel that in each other and whatever. And so we can connect in that way. But my humble opinion about paranormal investigations is leave them the fuck alone. Right?
Yeah.
These poor spirits, they're just like hanging out at this house. Maybe they had a traumatic death. Maybe they had a traumatic life. They're angry. They're upset, whatever. Do you need to poke the bear? You just and we leave them alone unless they specifically ask for our help. That's my
Yes.
feeling. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. And for 5 years I spent on this paranormal team, I felt like I had a kind of varying different opinion than a lot of the people that I would meet. And it
Right.
was also like, I hate using the word toxic, but like there was an icky vibe to it. And the more that I did it, the more that I was kind of like, I don't know, feel, I don't feel right here. So I stopped doing that. And I think the people that at the same time, a lot of the people that I did work with had a good attitude about it, where it was kind of like, we're not banishing anything. It's kind of like, who's here? Let's kind of, if people are experiencing things in their homes, let's try to understand who that is. Do they need anything? Do they want anything? Do they want to be left alone?
Right.
So I was kind of okay with that portion of it, but you're right. I think, there's a whole persona to some of the paranormal investigation that happens out there. And I don't do it anymore just because of how it left me feeling.
Well, yeah.
But
And you're really connecting with these spirits, and they're the ones that can communicate with you. So you're getting the brunt of all of that psychic energy. And that must have been exhausting for you.
yeah, it was exhausting. And it's different than how mediumship, when I'm sitting with a person to read for them, it feels very different than kind of going into a space and connecting, especially with like spirits that have trauma, that if we have true paranormal activity. And I think a lot of it wasn't even ghosts that we were connecting with. I think there was a lot of residual energy. There was a lot of energy around the people in the
Yeah.
homes that we were connecting into that I think can manifest in different ways. um but I just lost my train of thought.
Do you feel like, because obviously in those environments, right, you're being the person barraged with all of that
Oh
energy,
yeah.
right? So I had a friend back in New York who also was a psychic medium, and she really struggled to keep the, for lack of a better term, the voices,
Yeah.
right? She really struggled to keep it at bay, and she would have to be like super caffeinated so she could
Mhm.
focus on other things. And when she was going to give a reading, she would have no coffee, no caffeine, so that she could let it all in. Do you have anything like that? Like, are you just constantly, like, are you sitting here looking at me right now and being barraged by my relatives? Because if you are,
No.
I'm sorry, they're crazy. But, but like, how do you do? I'm sure you talk about that in your magical
Yeah,
mediumship book. But could you give us
definitely.
a little bit of that?
Yeah, I try to be very real about boundaries, because I think exactly that. You don't want that to happen. You don't want it to be impacting your day-to-day life. I used to work in hospitals when I was doing hospice volunteering.
Right.
There's a lot of energy, not even just mind the spirits that are there, but just the energy of places like that. So I worked really closely to protect myself, to really be able to say, okay, I'm open for business when I'm open for business, and otherwise I'm shut. I'm not, reading other people. I'm not, because I think it's important to have boundaries too. Like, you don't want to just be going up to people and like, picking at their personal lives, things like that. And then some people do that. But of my opinion is it's not a great idea to do that.
Yeah, psychic
And
etiquette is a thing.
it is. I used to have a hard time where I would get visitations at night, and so I wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to sleep, and I would sort of see things, fragments of things, and it was really disruptive. So I have a very strong no spirits in the bedroom policy. So and how I get around that is if there is something that somebody wants to get through when I am sitting at my altar, when I am meditating, when I'm open, that's the time I allow for messages to come through. And if there's really a strong want or need, which is rare, to get a message through to somebody, I will go back and challenge that spirit and say, help get them in front of me, because I'm not going to Teresa Caput it on this, like on this, your mom says this,
Right.
I need the permission to be able to deliver that message. So
Right.
somehow, some way, either get them in front of me for a reading or get me in a conversation where it comes up, where we end up talking about it and it just, feels right. And I'm able to ask for that permission, or I'm able to bring through something and say, I had a dream about this. Do you want to hear about it? Here's what it, kind of came through as. But I won't give readings or messages without permission, because I just think there's so much loaded with that. So talking
Yeah.
about grief, I think you can be, there's so much that can happen. You want to do it in an ethical way, and you want to honor the spirit, but you want to also honor the person who's going through this process,
Yeah.
because that's really important as well.
Have you ever had like a crazy experience like that where you're like, I have to psychic etiquette be damned. I have to tell this person this thing. Has that ever happened to you?
Um, with a close friend. So I feel like I was able to say, and she was a coworker actually, and she was like my right hand man. And her father had passed away, and we had gone to the funeral, and it was one of the few times where I saw him there. Like, it was like I could like see him
Yeah.
at the service. And usually my clairvoyance is not like that. Like, I get images and things. It's more an internal process. But like, I had this really intense experience where I saw him, and it was when she was up delivering the eulogy, and it was just such really beautiful thing. And so
Wow.
I didn't want to mess with her grief, because I didn't know exactly how she felt about everything. She knew what I did, but she wasn't like, we weren't super close about it. And I asked him, and I had a message for her at the time too, and I asked him to bring it up, somehow get it to be said. And if I have that opportunity, I'm going to bring it up. And she asked me the question. We were walking in between buildings, and I remember it. She's like, have you ever seen somebody like at a funeral? Like, she asked me point blank if I had ever seen that. And I was like, one time. And I'm like, I'm going to tell you about this. Is this okay? And I told her, and she was just really moved, and we were crying, and it was beautiful. But it was just crazy, the fact that she even asked that question.
Is it?
And so I really do feel like they can help
Yeah.
facilitate those things happening. It is really cool when stuff like that happens.
Isn't it funny how we, as the witches, still are like, isn't that crazy? Like, it's kind of the world that we live in, right? Like, I was on the receiving end of something like that, which often you don't want to be on the receiving end of bad psychic etiquette, right?
Right.
But this is years ago. I was at an event in Maryland just working, and a friend who was somebody that I would see from time to time at these events, right? He was the MC of the events, and he never even alluded to the fact that he was psychic in any way. And it was in the morning before the show opened, and I was just like drinking my coffee and I see him. I'm like, how are you? Good morning. And he's like, listen, I don't ever do this, but your grandmother spoke to me. And I was like, my grandmother's still alive. And he's like, no, the other grandmother. And he goes, she just wanted me to tell you she's sorry she never got to meet you. And you're a lot like her. And she's really proud of you. And I was
Oh,
like, whoa, that was
yeah.
crazy. Like, crazy. So that was a positive experience in which, I was very, very grateful to have that moment. And again, it was a friend. It wasn't a stranger coming up to me and saying that, but I would assume that for someone like you, you have to be moved in such a way to sort of break that barrier. And that doesn't happen
Yeah,
often.
right. It doesn't happen often. And I think it's because I try to really set firm boundaries, but every once in a while something comes up. But yeah,
Your
because it can
mediumship
be hard.
work.
I know
Yeah.
when I was in the spiritualist like development groups, people didn't always have the psychic etiquette that I think maybe, and that's not for all spiritualists. I don't want to be like bashing spiritualism. Uh,
You're not.
I appreciate a lot of it. But I would have people that would come up to me and give me readings about babies all of the time. And I was like 22, 23, young, early 20s. And I was just like, nope, like you're barking up the wrong tree, ladies. And but I would get it all the time. People would stop me and be like, I have to tell you about the baby that you have that is coming. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not. So, one person might take that in such a different way. Like, luckily, I was like, whatever, like, I know myself.
And then I
But
wonder,
it
like, is
was,
that really like psychic etiquette? Is that really like mediumship etiquette? Or are you just like trying to push your fucking have babies agenda on me? Because
yeah, yeah,
because you have kids and you think every woman is supposed to have kids or they're not going to have a good life, whatever. Someone
right.
told me I was at a funeral
Oh,
and somebody came up to me and was like, I had a dream about you last night that you had twin boys and they were just beautiful and blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, that's totally inappropriate. And
yeah.
now I do have twin boys.
I
They're
was just gonna say,
cats.
you do twin boy kitties.
They're cats, but they are twinsies. So maybe it came true. I don't know, but I thought that was so fucking rude.
Yeah, it was.
You did all of this work in your magical mediumship book that came out a couple of years ago. And it was unfortunate because you were not able to really do a lot of talking about it, do a lot of podcasts about it because you were sick at the time.
Yeah. So it was a bummer. So it came out in 2020, the end of 2020, and which was already a bummer of a year to promote a book.
Totally a bum. Wrote a book in 2020, sucked. I mean, it's a great book,
Yes.
but
Yes.
mine also didn't get out there.
Yeah, yep. So that was already a bust. And then yeah, I had this really profound experience on a health journey where in early 2021 I started to get sick. And actually it's so interesting because I was taking W5 at the time. So I'm in the Temple of Witchcraft, and the final, year plus long program is their seminary program, or their seminary level. And I had just started it, and the week that I started it was when I started to get symptoms.
Yeah.
And we thought it was just sort of some autoimmune thing. I have had chronic migraines, my entire life. I have autoimmune issues that we, haven't been able to put our finger on exactly. Is it lupus? Is it rheumatoid arthritis? Is it, some kind of inflammatory arthritis bullshit?
Yeah.
And
Situation.
yeah,
Yeah.
situation. So I've had that flare up from time to time. And so I just sort of assumed that was what was happening because I was getting sicker and sicker, and I was getting rashes, and I was not feeling well and fatigued and joint pain and all that good stuff. So as I was going through that the initial descent of the goddess process, I'm sort of getting sicker and sicker, and I'm like, oh my God, what is happening to me? So I'm not saying that the Temple of Witchcraft caused this, first of all. Let me just put that
No,
out there.
no, no.
This was
It's just
just so
happening at the same
coinciding.
time. Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
coinciding with a spiritual journey that I was on. The fact that this illness sort of tagged along for the ride, I think is really profound. And I got a lot of lessons out of this. Not that it's my fault, not that it's anybody's fault if you are sick. So don't let
Mm-hmm.
anybody tell you that. I think that
Mm-hmm.
is such crap. And I've had people say it to me, oh, did you anger the spirits? Oh, did you, blah, blah,
This is
blah,
just my fucking body. Okay. Like it's just what
yeah,
it is.
no,
Not
no,
everything is about spirit and magic and blah. Sometimes it's just what it is.
yeah. And I think that you can learn lessons from it. I think there can be,
Yes.
beneficial partnership. We can look at it in
Yes.
lots of different ways, which I talk about in my book, but like, for fuck's sake, it's not your fault.
So on that note, let's take a quick break. Let's hear from our sponsors. And then let's come back and let's dive into your new book, Chronically Magickal. So we'll be right back on Conversational Witchcraft with Danielle Dionne, and stay with us. We are back on Conversational Witchcraft with Danielle Dionne, and we've been talking about psychic mediumship, and we've been talking about your journey into witchcraft and mediumship. And we were just before the break discussing how right when your first book was coming out, you were dealing with some serious, serious health stuff. And no one could kind of figure out what it was, right? I myself am someone who deals with chronic illness. I have celiac disease. I have a bunch of other things that no one can pretty much define. Like, hey, what's wrong with you? I don't know. And often I get, you're fat, lose weight. And I'm like, I'm not sick because I'm fat. I'm fat because I'm sick. Right. This has just always been my body. This is just, this is just what it is. So, and you were starting to tell us about how your physical health started to deteriorate at the same time you were kind of like on this really deep spiritual journey. Can you talk to us about how those two things informed each other?
Yeah. So, yes. So I was getting sicker and sicker. I went through the Descent to the Goddess process with the class that I was part of. And I had identified my year-long journey. I wanted to be reflective on motherhood.
Oh,
And so I was asking questions like, do I want to be a mom? Do I want to be a biological mom? Do I want to adopt? So I kind of had this intention for the year to like work this stuff out. And on Mother's Day of that year, I had a stroke. And I was like, it's just so weirdly how aligned it is. It's such a,
the
it's
synchronicity of
nuts to
it.
look back.
Yeah.
Yes. So I had a stroke and I had 12 platelets left at the time. And so if I hadn't had that stroke, I would have been dead by the next day, basically. So it saved my life in some regards. And it really catapulted me into finding out that I have an autoimmune blood disorder called TTP. And from that point forward, the next, over a year, but pretty much a year, was dealing with this big, autoimmune blood disorder fiasco, where, I went to the hospital and almost died, was able to, identify the fact that I was able to get it identified in time was
It's
miraculous
amazing.
unto itself,
Yeah.
because a lot of people die right out of the gate because they can't identify it. They don't know what's going on. And you have to treat
Wow.
it with like plasmapheresis, where they take all the blood out of your body and they put in a ton of other people's plasma, and
Oh my
they
God. Oh my
give you
God.
so much steroids. Like I was bouncing off the walls.
Wow.
And
And you went back, if my memory serves,
yeah,
you went back and forth. You were in the hospital, you were out, in, out. Like this was months.
yeah, it was a lot. So I was in the hospital for about a month. I had gone home for like a few days and I had relapsed. And then I had to come back, and then I had to do outpatient treatments for a little while.
Yeah.
And then I've been back in since, which I'll share that story. But basically it became a long year of like having to deal with, oh my gosh, I'm sick now. Like I've been sick before, but now I'm really sick. Like
Well,
this
now you
is,
have a definition. You have a chronic. It's not, oh, I got sick and I don't feel good for a week, or oh, I've got COVID, or I've got the flu and I'm gonna recover. It's holy shit. How do I manage this new normal?
yeah, exactly. And, my spiritual practice was really robust before this. Like I had many altars to maintain and many spirit contacts that I felt really passionate about, connecting with and honoring, and, making offerings on a very particular schedule. And just, I had a very different magical life than I do now.
Mm.
And one of the things that I was really inspired to write about was to write a book anyway about chronic illness and, navigating chronic illness with witchcraft, because there wasn't really anything out there like that.
Mhm.
And so over the next few years, as I got better, as I've relapsed, as you have good days, you have bad days, you have times where things are not going super swell, and then you have times where I'm lucky and fortunate that there are lots of good days at this point.
Mm.
But how do you maintain a practice? How do you um, incorporate your new normal into your magic, and how does it influence that, and what can you take away from your chronic illness? How can you partner
Right.
with it better to have better experiences. How do you reduce side effects from medications? How do you connect with the spirit of disease for your illnesses? Um, there's lots of little things that just along the way started to make sense. And I wanted to write a book about it. So that's what I did.
And it is, I was saying before we hit the record buttons, before we started, there's a handful of people that I consider friends that are writing really important books. One of them is Courtney Weber's
Yes.
Sacred Tears. It's all about grief through the eyes of witchcraft, which is really important. This for me is top on my list of important books that have not been brought up in our community, right? That as witches, as pagans, as energy workers, this is something that I myself struggle with. This is something that many people in our community struggle with. And we never talk about it through the eyes of witchcraft, right? If we are whole beings, emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical, and our witchcraft and our energy work is something that we are, it's not what we do, it's who we are. And our physical bodies are, fucked up. How can we then manage these other parts of ourselves, spiritual, mental, emotional? It's all connected. So we have to connect all those pieces, right? And if we're not talking about our spiritual health and our chronic illnesses together, both of those things are going to suffer. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely would agree. Yeah, that's a really great point.
I just feel like oftentimes people with chronic or invisible illnesses, as you said before, it's not your fault. We beat ourselves up about why can't I do this thing today that I could do yesterday? And then we stress about what if I can't do this thing tomorrow, right? And then we get this weird, I don't know if this happens to you, but this guilt. I'm not good enough. I'm
Yep.
sitting here. The imposter syndrome is real. How can I sit here and be like, let's talk about kitchen witchcraft and being mindful in the kitchen? And I'm like, I don't have the energy and my stomach is so sick right now that all I can do is eat this box of gluten-free saltine crackers because otherwise I feel like I'm going to die. Am I a bad witch? Am I a hypocrite? How am I living my best spiritual life? There's so much around the chronic illness and how we relate it to our identity and then
Yep.
our spiritual identity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk a lot about dispelling guilt in the book, because I think that's such a big thing. We talk about pacing and how do we manage our energy, so that we can just function day to day. And again, your practice is going to look different than when you are healthy. When you are healthy, when you were healthy, it depends. Luckily I have good days and I have bad days, but I know on bad days my practice is going to look different, and that's okay. It's it's hard to have a daily practice if you don't feel good half of the time. And it's not realistic. So how do you set yourself up for success in a way that you're not going to feel guilty and you're not going to feel like, oh my God, I'm the worst witch in the world, if I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. So I talk about some different techniques that I've used that have helped me through getting through those things, because I've been there too. Like, again, yeah, a totally imposter syndrome, total guilt.
Like, what are three
and
things that come to mind that somebody who's listening to this might say, gee, I suffer with, lupus and I have a hard time getting to my altar because I'm always tired and everything always hurts. Could you say like three quick things or two quick things that person might be able to incorporate, even just into their mindset or the way they think about their practice?
Yeah, one of the things that I have done when I have been like bedridden, and I might normally be making an offering, or I would be wanting to make an offering, because again, my practice has changed vastly, from before. I will, even if and again, if you have the energy, because again, it's all going to be dependent. And sometimes you can't do anything, and you need to accept that, and that's okay. But one of the things that I've done is visualization of myself doing the things that I would normally be doing. So can I go to my altar? Can I be, I'm putting out flowers for this deity. I'm honoring them. I'm talking to them in my, either out loud or either, with internally, um, you know, go through that process of what you were going to do or what you would like to do if you could. So even if you weren't going to be able to do that, what could I do to make this communion, this connection happen, or this offering or this ritual even? So it can be small things, it could
Wow.
be grandiose. But for me, it's just been a lot. Like for me, it's the ancestor altar. It's like I remember when my ancestor altar that I care so deeply about, that I've had these, that I have a very set schedule for how I make offerings and how I make offerings. When I couldn't do that, that was something that really helped me because and again, my ancestors, do they care? I don't think so. They knew that I was sick. They understood. I think that they supported me through it. But for me, it was just something that I really wanted to be able to do. And so, walking through those steps while I was in bed was really helpful. And then like thinking about passive magic. So like sigils are really beneficial.
Mm.
So one of the things, well, one of the things that I have really strived to do is to work with medication. So I take a lot of medication now. And before I had like very like medically like the pill boxes that look like they're from the hospital or they look like they're in a nursing home and you just kind of feel like ugh
Yeah.
when you see them.
Yeah.
I have a really beautiful pill box now that I've decorated and that I have sigils on. So I have sigils to promote the medicine to so it can do its job. I have to remembering to take my medication sigil and then one to reduce side effects. So doing little things that can help you like when you are well so that when you're not feeling well, you kind of got passive magic that's already sort of happening. Might be another thing for people to try.
I love
But
that
yeah,
so much. I think oftentimes we witches think, oh, I can fix whatever's wrong with me with
oh yeah,
magic.
no, my book is not like that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Or I don't want and listen, I'm the last person to want to go to the doctor. I'm the last person that wants to take a pill. But sometimes that's what we have to do. And that's why we're lucky that we live in this time in this place,
Yes.
because we have that available to us. And usually for me in my own personal life, I need a combination of things. I need, herbal tea, but then I also need, drugs. And you know,
Yeah.
and then I also need physical therapy, and then I also need mental therapy, and then I also need spiritual therapy. It's got to all work together. But so often people are like, I'm just going to carry these stones with me and it's going to make my hips stop hurting. Probably not. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. My book is very much like out of the gate. Like, this is not a curative book. I'm sorry. I can't get rid of your illnesses, but how can we better live with our illnesses? And how can we, navigate chronic illness with witchcraft? Like, how can we still use practical magic and mundane techniques to manage our energy for the better? Um,
so
and really, the book
important.
was written for anybody who's got any ongoing illness. So that can be, chronic illnesses, invisible illnesses, autoimmune, mental health, ongoing illness, or anybody that's supporting somebody through illness. And if that's not somebody right now, at some point in your life, you're probably going to be on one of those sides of things.
Yes.
So I think that it's, worth checking out if you are somebody who's a magic practitioner and need to confront a lot of those things about dispelling guilt and accepting help.
Accepting help, right? When you have chronic illness, you literally, and maybe this is just because the society that we grew up in and the way that we're taught is, your worth is entwined with your productivity, right?
Yes.
Like if you are someone that suffers with any type of chronic pain, chronic illness, autoimmune issue, depression, even, like these are real things. These are real chemical, physical things that are going on in your body. It's not your fault. And it's okay to ask for help, right? Like there are two things in my life that have been really transformative. The first one was when someone said to me, no is a complete sentence. You do not have to quantify or apologize for your no. No is a complete sentence. And the other one was just say yes, please. If someone asks you if you'd like help and you say, yes, please, you're not hurting them. You're not admitting weakness. You're not, saying you can't do something. You're saying, yes, I will accept help. Right? Can you talk a little bit about accepting help in magic and accepting help managing your chronic illness?
Yeah. So here's a great example. When I was coming out of the hospital and when I was in the hospital, I had several, and one in particular, amazing kitchen witch that would bring me food. And it was so hard for me to accept, like, just to be so grateful on this receiving end, but also feel so awkward about it in some way. And you were just so amazing and so kind, and you just kept showing up and kept showing up with food and just feeding my whole family. And it was just incredible. Like, I can't thank you enough because that meant so much to me. And like, I don't even know if you know how much it meant to me. But that was one of the things that I struggled so hard with when people would ask, do you need something? And I would be like, no, I don't need anything. Like, oh my God, like, how do I say yes to this? And it's about like getting to the core of like why we feel like we can't accept something, that like we're measured by our productivity, that, that we're not contributing to society, that we're useless members here.
That you're
That's
somehow
so not
burdening
true.
people, that you're
Yes, the
that you're
burden.
somehow burdening people. People love you particularly, Danielle, and then you, the general you. People love you. You are loved. When you say no and you put up that barrier for not a good reason, it's good to say no. It's good to have healthy boundaries. It is not good to say no to your own detriment.
Right.
And
Exactly.
also, people want
People
to
want to
help,
help. Yes.
right?
Yes.
So if you're looking at it that way, you're going, you're really taking away someone's joy in helping you.
Yeah.
Listen, and this is not about you and me, right? But like, one of the things I want to do today is I've got to make some soup because a very dear friend of mine had some teeth pulled. She's really depressed. She's not able to eat good food. And it breaks my heart that she feels like crap. Like, not only is she feeling like crap, she also struggles with some chronic illness, that nutrition is really important for her. So she's not getting her nutrition. She's not going to be able to heal from this oral surgery. What can I do? How can I help? I can make soup. I can make soup. That's no skin off my nose. And I would love to do it, you know? So it's also, I don't know if you can hear, the cat is crying because it started raining and he
Oh
got wet
no.
because he was sitting in the window that was open. I apologize for that. I'm
That's
on
okay.
a rant about helping people with food. No, but accepting help when we are not at our best
Yes.
is not taking advantage of people,
Oh, I know.
right?
But it's one thing to say that and then one thing to do it. Oh, hello, friend.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's serious. That's Mr. Serious Black Cat.
oh,
And
he's
there
so
goes
cute.
his tail.
I've got my kitties near me too.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's
but
hard.
yeah,
It's
it is
hard.
hard.
And to be fair, like, you're the person who's chronically ill. Who's supporting the person taking care of you?
Exactly. Yes. So that's another thing.
Right? Right? Because someone, if you're in a bad spot, someone is taking care of you,
Yes.
right? Someone is your caretaker. Who takes care of the caretaker?
Yep. Caring for the caretakers. So we talk about that in the book as well. Um,
So
because that's
important.
an often neglected and overlooked piece of the puzzle, right?
Right?
Uh,
Because your only job when you have chronic illness or when you're going through a flare up or something is to handle your business, take care of yourself, do what you need to do, whether it is you stay in bed or eat the soup or whatever you need to do, is take care of yourself and then let others in. How does that translate into a witchy or a ritual situation? Like, are there any magical tips you have for allowing acceptance of help?
Oh yeah. Um, well, I think allowing people to send healing is a big example of this. So, that was another thing that people wanted to do and wanted to offer that I, was super grateful for. And again, it's if that resonates with you, because I know sometimes people energetically I just love
I'm
this cat.
really sorry about the cat. I'm just
Oh, hi, buddy.
really, he weighs 1,000 pounds and he just really wants to be here right now. But yeah,
Oh,
accepting that, right? And then there's also like people that are like, I'm gonna pray for you. Like, I don't like that.
and
But if somebody asks me, what can I do for you? Do you feel comfortable asking for healing?
yeah, I think again, it's advocating for what you need.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody that you trust that you want to ask for healing, I think it's totally okay. And they can say no too, and that's all right as well. So I think it's getting comfortable with exchanges, energetically, and because it's all energy. But
Well,
yeah,
that's,
so
yeah. And so important that these conversations are being had. So important that you wrote this book because people need to hear what you have to say on this subject. And also the fact that you are so honest and open about your own experiences, that right there kind of shows, oh, I hate to use this term, but like your courage in this subject matter, because most people don't want to admit that they're vulnerable. And I think in the vulnerability is where we find our greatest strength, right?
yeah, definitely. I feel like my first book, like I was an expert on that material. I've been doing it for 18 years, but more than that, since I was a little kid, this has
Yeah.
been, a fascination of mine. And I've had, lots of practice and been able to test it with people and, teach other people. And then this is very much like I'm coming from a really personal place. And so here's what's worked for me. I hope it works for you. I hope, while our experiences may differ wildly, vastly, I hope that everybody is able to take something away that resonates with them from it. And, that's why I put it out there.
And we are all very, very grateful. This is another one of those books that I want to buy for everyone that I know that suffers with illness or depression, um, or any kind of a condition, because looking through it in this through this lens gives us another tool to get through the shit times and then really enjoy the good times and appreciate the magical work that we can still do. Your condition, your illness, it doesn't define you. You don't have to give up the things that you love or the things that identify as your joy, like your witchcraft, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You are still magical. We are all, it's not going to change, the fact that you are a magical person and that this is part of your life. In fact, it can even strengthen it in some ways. And like I said, I don't think that, we necessarily have a reason that we face these things, but there's so much that we can get out of it that we shouldn't, overlook that. And I think a lot of people don't think about their illness in that way. Um, as a teacher, so a lot of times we have that warrior mentality where it's kind of like, I'm fighting this good fight. And that's totally great. If that works for you and
Yeah.
your process, then work with that paradigm. But I might argue, what can you partner with how can you partner with your illness to work better together? So even if it's not going away, it's going to be, with you forever. Can you hold its hand a little bit and see if there are things that you can do magically or, even in the mundane world, to better manage, your symptoms, your, flare ups, whatever sort of is thrown at you.
Yeah, to understand it, to recognize it, name it, call it out. I
Yeah.
spoke with someone a while back. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he wrote a really good book called Empty Cauldrons.
Oh, it's Terrence Ward.
Terrence Ward,
It's a great
and
book.
a great book dealing with depression through the eyes of witchcraft. And again, like this, such an important subject, right? And one of the things he said about his depression, which I think is valid when it comes to, we're talking about illness and chronic illness and pain and things like that. He said he looked at his depression and he invited it in and he held its hand and said, what do you need from me today? Right? For us to look at our illnesses and say, what do you need from me today? You know, I mean, what you deal with is so different from what I deal with, what's so different from someone else deals with. Spiritually, what does your illness need today? Physically, what does your illness need today? Again, if it needs to sit on the couch and watch reruns of the Golden Girls, cool. Forgive yourself, enjoy it, and get back to shit tomorrow, right? Don't fight that need. That's what I've learned,
Absolutely.
right? Take the time. You're just amazing. What do you hope that people take from this book? If one thing they could walk away from this book, what would it be?
I hope that it's empowering for people. I think that it can be so disempowering to be faced with chronic illness or just illness in general. And knowing that you're still a magical being, that you can still practice witchcraft, even if you are facing rough days, hard days, ongoing illness, that it's worth it for you to do too. Like you're going to get something out of this. You're going to be, you can really still change your world, even if your world has changed significantly.
You can really change your world, even if your world has changed significantly. So important. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Sometimes we feel stuck and, maybe before illness, you felt like you had more control. You felt like maybe you were, making larger strides, and then something happens and you feel like you have no control. But your witchcraft, your magical practices, these are little ways for you to tap into your mental state of being, your spiritual state of being, and keep that control over your overall well-being. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And taking that, power back into your hands, that control where you can. So, for example, like your medical team, for example, if you don't have doctors on your side that you really feel are, helping you, which I think is a problem that we face sometimes. Like I know I had a really uh challenging doctor, hematologist, who was brilliant in a lot of ways, and I'm grateful for the care that I was given, but at the same time was not listening to me. And so when he departed the practice, I did magic around, I want a very specific type of doctor to show up. And, I listed all those things out, and I talk about it in the book about, different ways that you can go about magically doing this, and was able to, I got her, she's awesome. And so thinking about ways to incorporate magic into your mundane health concerns, or things that are really you know um whether that be, I have to just show up for work today and I feel like crap. Can I summon a glamourish spell? And maybe I'm not going to look perfect, but like, what can I do to sort of pull myself together energetically and get through whatever I need to get through? So again, not curative, but here we go. How can we manage what is happening to us?
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing, Danielle. Thank you for this book. From the bottom of my heart, and from all the hearts that you're going to touch and the lives you're going to change with this book. Um, it's a very important work. And I hope everyone who deals with any of this buys this book, learns from you, connects with you. This is important shit. I'm just saying. So tell us where we can find you online, how to buy the book, where to buy the book, and all that jazz.
Yeah, so you can find me at danielledionne.com or seedandsickle.com. Either is fine, and you'll get all my information that way. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram as well. And the book comes out in September, so yay. And you can get that at your local bookstores, support your local metaphysical shops first if you can. I always appreciate that. But it should be wherever books are sold as well. So get it however
So
you need to.
fabulous. Yes, support, local. The book is called Chronically Magickal. It should be available at the airing of this podcast in September. So you can buy it, and you can buy like 4 copies, and you could like give them to everybody for the holiday season. I'm just saying. Okay. All right. Last question. I ask this to everybody who comes on my show. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. If you could have me make you one magical meal, what would it be and why? Now, this is kind of a loaded question because I've already cooked a bunch of shit for you.
I know.
So I don't know if you want a repeat meal or you want something new.
Oh
Tell
yeah,
me.
I know what it is already. It is Dawn's chili. It's phenomenal. I love your chili. It was my favorite thing when I got out of the hospital. So, yes, Dawn's chili is fantastic. I would want that again. Or Dawn's tomato sauce is also fantastic, which you can now get, which is
You can now
exciting.
buy
So
it
I
in a
can get it
jar.
whenever I want.
But that's different because that's just the marinara sauce, and I probably made you meatballs.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh
made
my
you, I
gosh.
made you
Anything Dawn makes is
gravy.
amazing.
Great. And I
Yes.
only make gravy and meatballs like 3 or 4 times a year.
Mm.
And it's because you can't rush the meatball. It's a process. It's an all day process. It's something that you need at least 12 hours. And if you don't have like a couple of years ago for Thanksgiving, I made like, I think it was like 36 or 48-hour gravy where I put everything in the crock pot and then I chilled it and then recooked it. And then like I did it like 3 times and it
Oh my gosh.
cooked for like 3 days. It was amazing. But next time I make a batch of chili, I'll bring you some
Oh, well, thank you. I
because
would
I
love to
make
eat
that like
it.
once a month.
Yeah, it's hearty, it's delicious. It was soul warming.
Oh, I'm so happy you liked it. Yeah. And let's just break that down, right? Beans are all prosperity food. Turkey, poultry, that's all health and well-being food. And then it's in a tomato sauce base, which is all about love and connection and sharing love. And then you top it with a bunch of cheese, and cheese is all joyful and nurturing energy. So that's right there, like that's, and if you want to break it down even further, you got garlic for protection, and onions for banishing negativity. So all of that, I mean, talk about a wellness, like you said, it's like comfort food, a wellness food, but really like healing, So it is
Yes.
something I make like once a month.
Oh, it's so good.
So
So
maybe I'll
yes,
have
it
to
was
bring you
healing to
some.
me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And Danielle, thank you again for being here. This was just amazing. We've gone like way over time and I don't fucking care. Um, Danielle Dionne, the book is Chronically Magical. The first book is Magical Mediumship, if you want to pick that up as well. You're amazing. We'll put all of your links and everything on the show notes so people will be able to find you. And I highly recommend booking a reading with Danielle because she's effing outstanding. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you. I had such a good time. I appreciate it.
And until
Yay.
next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and so much gratitude.